The music stopped. The laughter died. In the middle of Chicago's most dangerous underground club, a young waitress lay screaming on the floor, her body twisted in agony. "I can't close my legs. It hurts. Please, God, it hurts," she sobbed, clutching her shattered hip. The man who pushed her, the son of a rival mobster, just laughed. But the laughter ended the moment the VIP curtains parted. Lorenzo Bianchi, the capo of the city, stepped out. He didn't yell. He didn't draw a gun. He did something so unexpected, so terrifyingly gentle, that it brought grown men to tears and started a war that would burn the city to the ground. This is the true story of how a spilled drink changed everything. The Onyx Room didn't smell like cigarettes and stale beer. It smelled of expensive cologne, seared steak, and fear. That was the first thing Victoria Miller learned when she took the job 3 weeks ago. You didn't look the patrons in the eye, you didn't speak unless spoken to, and you never, ever dropped a tray. Victoria was 22, working double shifts to pay off the debt her father had left behind before vanishing into the murky waters of the Chicago River. She was tired. Her feet throbbed in the cheap black heels the management forced her to wear. Table 4 needs a refill on the scotch. The 30-year-old bottle, the floor manager, a sweaty man named Rick, hissed at her. "And fix your hair. You look like a mess." Victoria nodded, wiping a stray lock of blonde hair from her forehead. She hurried to the bar, her hands trembling slightly as she balanced the heavy crystal decanter and 4 glasses on her serving tray. Table 4 was the worst table in the house. It was occupied by Vinny the Brat Falcone and his crew. Vinny was the nephew of a rival Don, allowed in the Onyx Room only because of a fragile truce between the Falcone family and the owners of the club, the Bianchi family. As Victoria approached, the air grew heavy. Vinny was loud, obnoxious, and already 3 drinks deep. He was leaning back in his chair, ash from his cigar falling onto the pristine tablecloth. "Hey, sweetheart," Vinny sneered as Victoria placed a coaster down. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else. Am I boring you?" "No, sir," Victoria said softly, keeping her eyes on the tray. "Just pouring your drink." "Look at me when I talk to you," Vinny snapped, grabbing her wrist. The sudden motion jerked the tray. Victoria gasped, trying to counterbalance, but it was too late. The heavy crystal decanter wobbled and tipped. Amber liquid cascaded over the edge, splashing directly onto Vinny's Italian silk suit pants. The entire club seemed to freeze. Vinny jumped up, his face turning a violent shade of purple. "You stupid little bit!" He didn't just yell. He lashed out. With a backhand fueled by rage and alcohol, he struck Victoria across the face. But it was the shove that followed that did the damage. He pushed her hard, sending her flying backward. Victoria's heels slipped on the polished marble floor. She went down awkwardly, her legs twisting beneath her as she slammed onto the hard surface. A sickening crack echoed through the room, louder than the shattering glass. For a second, there was silence. Then the screaming started. It wasn't a scream of fear. It was a scream of pure, white-hot physical agony. Victoria tried to curl into a ball, but her body wouldn't cooperate. Her pelvis had taken the full force of the fall, shattering the bone. Her legs were splayed at an unnatural angle, and every muscle spasm sent lightning bolts of pain through her core. "I can't," she shrieked, her hands hovering over her thighs, terrified to touch them. Tears exploded from her eyes. "I can't close my legs, it hurts. Oh God, it hurts." It was a raw, primal sound that made the stomach turn. She wasn't trying to be vulgar. Her body physically could not pull her legs together because the structure holding them was broken. Vinny Falcone stood over her, wiping the scotch off his pants, looking more annoyed than remorseful. "Look at this mess," he spat, kicking a piece of glass toward her face. "Someone get this trash out of here before I finish the job." Nobody moved. The waiters were terrified. The other patrons looked away. Rick, the manager, was cowering behind the bar. Victoria sobbed into the floor, the pain making the world spin black and grey. "Please," she whimpered, "help me." Then the heavy velvet curtains of the private VIP balcony on the mezzanine level parted. The atmosphere in the onyx room shifted instantly. If Vinnie Falcone was a barking dog, the man stepping onto the balcony was a wolf. Lorenzo Bianchi, the Don. He was 32, younger than most bosses, but his reputation was written in blood. He wore a charcoal three-piece suit that fit his broad shoulders like armor. His face was sharp, handsome in a severe way, with dark eyes that missed nothing. He didn't look angry. He looked bored, which was infinitely worse. He descended the grand staircase slowly. His footsteps were the only sound in the cavernous room. His right-hand man, a giant named Giovanni, followed a step behind. Lorenzo walked straight past his security, straight past the trembling manager, and stopped 5 feet from where Victoria lay weeping on the floor. He looked at Vinnie. "Vinnie," Lorenzo said. His voice was low, smooth, like gravel wrapped in velvet. "You're making a scene in my place of business." Vinnie puffed his chest out, though his eyes darted nervously to Giovanni. "This clumsy waitress ruined a $5,000 suit, Enzo. I was just teaching her a lesson." Lorenzo didn't look at the suit. He looked down at Victoria. She was pale, her skin clammy, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps. He saw the unnatural angle of her hip. He saw the terror in her eyes. "She's hurt," Lorenzo stated. It wasn't a question. "She's faking it," Vinnie scoffed. "Get up, you cow!" Vinnie moved to kick her again. Before the boot could connect, Lorenzo moved. It was a blur of motion. One moment he was standing still. The next, he had seized Vinnie by the throat and slammed him onto the nearest table. Glassware shattered. "Touch her again," Lorenzo whispered, leaning close to Vinnie's ear, "and I will peel the skin from your bones while you watch." He tossed Vinnie aside like a rag doll. "Giovanni, escort Mr. Falcone out. If he resists, break his legs. Both of them." As Giovanni dragged a protesting Vinnie out the back exit, Lorenzo knelt on the floor. He didn't care about the spilled scotch soaking into the knees of his expensive trousers. He hovered his hands over Victoria, afraid to move her. "Miss?" Victoria couldn't focus. The pain was a blinding white noise. I can't move them," she sobbed, humiliatingly exposed, unable to bring her legs together for modesty or comfort. "My hip, it's on fire." Lorenzo's expression softened, a crack in the stone facade. He took off his suit jacket. With gentle, precise movements, he laid it over her lower body, covering her legs and preserving her dignity. "I know," he said softly. "I know it hurts. Don't try to move." He looked up at the frozen room. "Clear the room! Now!" he roared. The patrons scrambled for the exits, leaving cash on the tables, terrified to witness what might happen next. "Rick!" Lorenzo barked. The manager ran over. "Yes, Mr. Bianchi?" "Call Dr. Sterling. Tell him to meet us at the penthouse immediately. Prepare the car." "Sir, the ambulance." "No ambulance," Lorenzo cut him off. "If she goes to a hospital, the police get involved. Falcone finds out where she is. He'll finish what he started to spite me." "She comes with me." Lorenzo looked back at Victoria. "I'm going to pick you up. It's going to hurt. But I need you to be brave for me. Can you do that?" Victoria looked into the dark, abyss-like eyes of the man everyone feared. She didn't see a monster. She saw a lifeline. She nodded weakly. Lorenzo slid his arms under her, one beneath her shoulders, one carefully under her knees. As he lifted her, Victoria screamed again, her head falling back, her vision going black. The last thing she felt was the smell of sandalwood and tobacco, and a strong hand pressing her head against a solid chest. "I've got you," he whispered. Victoria woke up in a room that was larger than her entire apartment. The ceiling was high, adorned with crown molding, and the walls were painted a soft, calming cream. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the Chicago skyline. She tried to sit up, but a sharp twinge in her hip stopped her. She gasped. "Careful." She turned her head. Sitting in a leather armchair in the corner of the room was Lorenzo. He wasn't wearing his jacket. His white dress shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms covered in faint scars. He was reading a file. Where am I?" Victoria rasped. Her throat felt like sandpaper. Lorenzo stood and poured a glass of water from a crystal pitcher. He walked over to the bed, which Victoria realized was a hospital-grade bed set up within a luxury bedroom. "You're in my home," Lorenzo said, holding the glass to her lips. She drank greedily. "My private doctor, Dr. Sterling, performed surgery on you last night. Your pelvis was fractured in 3 places. You have a long recovery ahead of you, Victoria Miller." Victoria froze. "You know my name." Lorenzo placed the glass down. He picked up the file he had been reading. "I make it my business to know everyone who works for me, especially when they become complications." "I'm sorry," Victoria said quickly, panic rising. "I'll pay for the surgery. I just need time. My dad left me some debts, but I can work." "You can't walk, let alone wait tables," Lorenzo said bluntly. "And you aren't paying for anything. This happened in my club. It's my responsibility." He tossed the file onto the bed near her hand. It fell open. Victoria saw a photo of her father, James Miller. "Why do you have this?" she whispered. Lorenzo walked to the window, his back to her. "Your father didn't just leave debts, Victoria. He was an accountant for the Irish mob. He stole $200,000 and ran. That's why he disappeared. The people looking for him, they aren't the police." Victoria's blood ran cold. She had always thought her dad was just a gambler. Is that who you are? Are you going to hurt me to get the money?" Lorenzo turned around. The look in his eyes was unreadable. "If I wanted to hurt you, I would have left you on the floor of the Onyx room." "No, the Falcones, Vinny's family. They are the ones your father stole from. Vinny didn't know who you were last night. He just saw a clumsy waitress. But now—" Lorenzo walked back to the bedside, leaning down, his hands bracing on the mattress on either side of her. "Now, word is out that I took you in, that I broke Vinny Falcone's nose for you. They are going to dig. They are going to find out who you are, and they will come for you to send a message to your father, wherever he is." Victoria trembled. "So what do I do?" "You stay here," Lorenzo said. "You can't close your legs because of the cast and the brace. You can't run. You are helpless out there. But in here, you are under my protection." "Why?" Victoria asked, tears welling up again. "Why would you do this for a waitress?" Lorenzo paused. For a fleeting second, he looked almost vulnerable. He reached out, his thumb grazing her cheek, wiping away a tear. The touch sent a shockwave through her that had nothing to do with fear. "Because," Lorenzo said quietly, 10 years ago, a man helped me when I was bleeding in an alleyway. He didn't ask questions. He just saved me. That man was James Miller, your father." Victoria's eyes widened. "He saved my life," Lorenzo said, straightening up and buttoning his cuffs, the mask of the Don sliding back into place. "Now I'm saving yours. But make no mistake, Victoria. You are a prisoner here, a prisoner in a golden cage. Until you can walk, and until the Falcones are dealt with, you belong to me." He turned to the door. "Rest. Dinner will be brought up at 7. The door clicked shut, leaving Victoria alone in the silence of the luxury penthouse. She looked down at her broken body, then at the photo of her father. She was safe, yes, but she was locked in a house with the most dangerous man in the city, a man who claimed to owe her father, but whose eyes promised both violence and a strange, terrifying warmth. She didn't know it yet, but the broken hip was the least of her problems. Her heart was next. 2 weeks bled into 3. The penthouse, effectively a fortress of glass and steel suspended above the clouds, became Victoria's entire world. Her recovery was grueling. The metal pins in her pelvis meant that even the slightest shift in weight sent shockwaves of agony through her body. She was bedridden, humiliated by her own helplessness. She expected Lorenzo to be a distant warden, checking in only to ensure his asset was still breathing. She expected him to leave the ugly, messy work of recovery to the team of private nurses he had hired. She was wrong. It was 3 a.m. on a Tuesday when the pain woke her. It wasn't the sharp crack of the bone this time. It was a deep, cramping ache in her muscles from lying in the same position for too long. The night nurse, a stern woman named Mrs. Higgins, was asleep in the chair outside the room. Victoria tried to reach for the water on the bedside table, but her fingers grazed the glass, knocking it over. Crash. The sound was deafening in the silence. Victoria froze, tears of frustration stinging her eyes. She couldn't even get a drink of water. She was useless. Before she could call out for the nurse, the door pushed open. It wasn't Mrs. Higgins. It was Lorenzo. He was still dressed in his slacks and a dress shirt, though the tie was gone and the top buttons were undone. He held a gun at his side, his eyes scanning the room instantly for a threat. When he saw the shattered glass and Victoria's tear-streaked face, he lowered the weapon and tucked it into the waistband of his pants at the small of his back. "I'm sorry," Victoria whispered, her voice trembling. "I was thirsty. I didn't mean to wake you." Lorenzo didn't speak. He walked into the room, stepping over the broken glass with bare feet, heedless of the danger to himself. He went to the bathroom, returned with a towel, and knelt. He cleaned the mess in silence. "You have staff for this," Victoria said, watching the most powerful man in Chicago wipe up water on his hands and knees. "The staff is sleeping," Lorenzo said, standing up, "and I was awake." He poured a fresh glass of water from a plastic bottle this time and brought it to her. But instead of handing it to her shaking hands, he sat on the edge of the bed. He slipped an arm behind her shoulders, lifting her slightly, a movement that they had practiced with the doctors, but which felt electric when he did it. "Drink," he commanded softly. She drank. The water was cool, but his body heat radiating through his shirt was scorching. When she finished, he didn't pull away immediately. "The pain?" he asked. "Bad tonight," she admitted. "My legs, they cramp because I can't move them." Lorenzo set the glass down. "The doctor showed me the massage techniques to help circulation. Mrs. Higgins usually does it." "I don't want to wake her," Victoria said. "She's tired." "Then I will do it." Victoria's eyes widened. "Lorenzo, no. You can't. It's—" She gestured vaguely to her legs, still kept apart by the foam wedge and braces required for a hip to heal properly. She felt exposed, ugly, broken. "Victoria," he said, his voice dropping an octave, "I have seen men gutted. I have seen things that would make you lose your mind. Do you think a bruised hip scares me?" He didn't wait for permission. He moved the blanket aside. Victoria squeezed her eyes shut, expecting rough, impatient hands. Instead, his touch was a ghost. He started at her ankles, his large, calloused hands kneading the tight muscles of her calves with a rhythmic, hypnotic pressure. He worked his way up to her knees, avoiding the surgical sites, but pressing firmly enough to drive the cramps away. For 20 minutes, the only sound in the room was the hum of the air conditioning and Victoria's ragged breathing. The pain began to recede, replaced by a strange, heavy warmth. "Why do you do this?" she asked into the semi-darkness. "You're the capo. You have an army. Why are you sitting here rubbing a waitress's feet at 3 a.m.? Lorenzo's hands paused on her knee. He looked up, his dark eyes catching the moonlight. "Because in this room, I'm not the capo," he said, his voice laced with an exhaustion she had never noticed before. "Out there, I am the monster everyone expects me to be. I make decisions that end bloodlines. I carry the weight of 300 families on my back. But in here, with you," he looked down at his hands, "you are the only innocent thing I have left in my life, Victoria. Taking care of you. It reminds me that I'm not completely dead inside." Victoria reached out, her fingers brushing the hair falling over his forehead. It was a bold move, one that could have gotten someone killed in the club. But here, Lorenzo leaned into her touch. "My father," Victoria whispered. "Did you love him?" Lorenzo stiffened. He was the first man to look at me and see a scared kid, not a weapon. When he disappeared, I tore the city apart looking for him. I failed him. He looked her dead in the eye. "I won't fail you." That night, Lorenzo didn't leave. He sat in the armchair next to her bed, gun on the table, and watched over her until the sun came up. Over the next week, the dynamic shifted. They played cards. He read to her Italian poetry that he translated on the fly, his voice acting as a sedative for her pain. She learned that he hated coffee, but drank it for the image, that he played the piano, and that he had a scar on his shoulder from a bullet meant for his younger brother. She was falling. It was classic Stockholm syndrome, she told herself, but it felt deeper. It felt like two drowning people clinging to the same piece of driftwood. But the bubble of safety was thin, and outside the sharks were circling. The attack didn't happen with a bang. It happened with a click. It was Friday evening. Victoria had been allowed to sit in a wheelchair for the first time. Lorenzo had arranged a private dinner on the balcony of the penthouse. The city lights twinkled below them, a sea of diamonds that felt 1,000,000 miles away. Lorenzo was cutting a piece of steak for her, a habit he hadn't broken, even though she could use her hands fine. He was smiling, a rare, genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Giovanni tells me the Falcones have gone quiet," Lorenzo said, handing her the fork. "Too quiet. It usually means they are plotting or retreating. I'm hoping for the latter." "And if they are plotting?" Victoria asked. "Then I burn them down," Lorenzo said simply. "But let's not talk business. Tonight is a celebration. You're out of bed." He raised his wine glass. "To healing." "To healing," Victoria echoed. The elevator doors at the far end of the penthouse chimed. Lorenzo frowned. "I didn't authorize anyone." He stood up instantly, his body shifting from relaxed dinner companion to lethal predator. He reached under the table, pulling a Sig Sauer P226 that was taped there. "Get inside," he ordered Victoria. "Now." "Lorenzo, I can't move fast," she panicked, fumbling with the wheels of the chair. The elevator doors opened. It was Rick, the manager from the Onyx room. He looked terrified, sweat pouring down his face, his hands raised in the air. "Mr. Bianchi, please," Rick shouted, stumbling into the foyer. Lorenzo kept the gun trained on him. "Rick, how the hell did you get past the lobby security? How did you get the passcode for the elevator?" They have my wife," Rick sobbed, falling to his knees. "Vinny. He has my wife and kids. He said if I didn't use the staff override." Lorenzo's face went pale. He understood instantly. Rick wasn't the threat. Rick was the distraction. "Get down!" Lorenzo roared, launching himself toward Victoria. The service entrance behind the kitchen, the one supposedly welded shut, exploded inward. 3 men in tactical gear stormed in. They weren't street thugs. They were professionals, hired mercenaries. The Falcones had escalated this beyond a gang war. Lorenzo tackled Victoria's wheelchair, tipping it over. She screamed as she hit the deck, the metal jarring her healing hip, blinding pain flashing through her vision. Lorenzo covered her body with his own as bullets shredded the balcony glass where they had just been sitting. Thwip, thwip, thwip. Suppressed fire. "Stay down," Lorenzo yelled. He returned fire, 2 controlled shots. The first mercenary dropped, a hole in his forehead. "Rick, the panic button under the bar. Hit it," Lorenzo shouted. Rick, paralyzed by fear, didn't move. A bullet from the second mercenary caught him in the chest. The manager slumped over, dead before he hit the floor. "Damn it!" Lorenzo gritted his teeth. He grabbed the back of Victoria's shirt. "I have to move you. Scream all you want, but we have to move." He dragged her behind the heavy marble kitchen island. Victoria was sobbing, the pain in her hip so intense she felt like she was going to vomit. "Lorenzo, they're going to kill us!" "Not tonight," he growled. He checked his magazine. "I have 6 rounds. There are at least 4 more coming up the stairs now that the perimeter is breached." He looked at her. His suit was torn, dust in his hair, blood on his cheek from a glass shard. "Victoria, listen to me closely," he said, his voice intensely calm amidst the chaos. "There is a dumbwaiter in the pantry. It goes down to the garage level. It's small, but you fit." "I'm not leaving you," Victoria cried, grabbing his arm. "You have to. They are here for you, Victoria. Not me." "Why?" "Because," Lorenzo fired 2 shots over the counter, forcing the mercenaries to take cover. "Because your father didn't just steal money. He stole the Falcone family's ledger, the book that lists every judge, every cop, every politician they own. Vinny thinks you know where it is." "I don't," she screamed. "I don't know anything." "I know." Lorenzo looked at her with heartbreaking intensity. "But they won't believe you. They will torture you until you die. Now go." He physically shoved her toward the pantry. Victoria dragged her body across the floor, every inch a battle. She reached the dumbwaiter, opening the small latch. "Lorenzo!" she screamed as she saw a mercenary flank the island. Lorenzo spun. He was too slow. The mercenary fired a shotgun. It wasn't a direct hit, but the spread caught Lorenzo in the left shoulder and chest. The impact threw him backward, slamming him against the refrigerator. He slid down, blood instantly blooming across his white shirt. "No!" Victoria shrieked. Lorenzo struggled to lift his gun with his good arm. His eyes were hazy. "Go!" he wheezed. "Victoria! Close the door!" The mercenary racked the shotgun, walking toward Lorenzo to finish him. Victoria looked at the dumbwaiter. It was her escape, her chance to live. She looked at Lorenzo, the man who had washed her feet, who had read her poetry, who was currently bleeding out on his kitchen floor to save her. Something in Victoria snapped. The fear vanished, replaced by a cold, hard resolve that she must have inherited from her father. She didn't climb into the dumbwaiter. Instead, she grabbed the heavy cast-iron skillet hanging from the rack near the pantry floor. Adrenaline flooded her system, masking the pain in her broken hip just enough. As the mercenary stood over Lorenzo, laughing, Victoria let out a guttural roar. She used her good leg to push herself up, balancing precariously against the pantry doorframe, and swung the skillet with every ounce of strength she possessed. Clang! The iron struck the back of the mercenary's head with a sickening crunch. He dropped like a stone, the shotgun clattering across the floor. Victoria collapsed instantly, her leg giving out. She crawled over the unconscious hitman to Lorenzo. He was conscious, but barely. His breath was bubbling. A lung was punctured. "You stupid girl," he whispered, blood coating his teeth. But his hand found hers, squeezing tight. "I'm not leaving you," she sobbed, pressing her hands onto his chest wound to staunch the flow. "I'm not leaving you." Suddenly the front doors blew open. Victoria flinched, expecting more mercenaries. She grabbed the fallen shotgun, pointing it at the door with trembling hands. "Don't shoot!" a voice roared. It was Giovanni. Behind him were a dozen of Lorenzo's soldiers. They had seen the silent alarm, the one Lorenzo triggered from his phone before he even flipped the table. Giovanni ran over, his face turning ashen when he saw the scene. The dead manager, the dead mercenaries, the waitress holding a shotgun, covered in blood, cradling the dying Don. "Get the medic!" Giovanni screamed. "Now!" He looked at Victoria. "Miss, you need to let go. We have him." "No," Victoria said, her voice hollow. "He said he wouldn't fail me. Tell him he didn't." Then the adrenaline crashed. The pain returned, a tidal wave that swallowed her whole. Victoria's eyes rolled back, and she slumped forward onto Lorenzo's chest, the two of them lying together in a pool of mixed blood on the cold marble floor. The beeping of the heart monitor was the only music left in Victoria's life. It had been 4 days since the attack. Victoria was in a private wing of St. Jude's Hospital, a floor entirely bought and paid for by the Bianchi family. Her hip had been reoperated on, more pins added to the shattered bone. The pain was a dull roar now, suppressed by morphine, but the pain in her chest, the fear, was agonizingly sharp. Lorenzo was in the room next door. He was in a medically induced coma. The shotgun blast had missed his heart by an inch, but the blood loss had been catastrophic. Giovanni stood by the window, looking like a statue carved from grief and rage. He hadn't slept. "Tell me the truth, Giovanni," Victoria said from her bed. Her voice was weak, but there was a new steel in it. The girl who cried over a spilled drink was gone. "Is he going to die?" Giovanni turned. "The doctors say the next 24 hours are critical. But the problem isn't just his health, Miss Victoria. It's the wolves." "Vinny," she spat the name. "Vinny Falcone knows he failed to kill Lorenzo," Giovanni explained grimly. "He knows a wounded lion is vulnerable. He's rallying the other families. He's telling them Lorenzo is dead, that the Bianchi territory is up for grabs. By tomorrow night, there will be a war in the streets. We are outnumbered." Victoria looked at the wall separating her from Lorenzo. She thought of the way he had washed her feet, the way he had taken a bullet for her without hesitation. "He needs the ledger," Victoria whispered. Giovanni sighed. "The ledger your father stole. Yes, if we had that, we could blackmail the Falcones into backing down. We could send Vinny to prison for life. But your father is a ghost, and the book is gone." "No," Victoria said, sitting up. The room spun, but she gripped the rails. "Bring me the file, the one Lorenzo had on my father." "Miss, you need to rest. Bring me the file, Giovanni," she snapped. It was the voice of a Don's wife, commanding and absolute. Giovanni blinked, surprised, and obeyed. He handed her the blood-spattered folder recovered from the penthouse. Victoria opened it to the photo of her father. She stared at it. James Miller, smiling, holding a fishing rod. Lorenzo had said he was the first man to look at me and see a scared kid. "My dad hated fishing," Victoria murmured. "He was allergic to the sun. He never went outside if he could help it." She looked closer at the photo. The fishing rod. It wasn't a rod, it was a pointer. He was pointing at something in the background, a specific building, the old First National Bank on State Street, and the date on the bottom of the photo, May 12th, 98. "Giovanni," Victoria looked up, her eyes burning. "My birthday is May 12th, 1998. "I don't understand. It's a safe deposit box," she said, her heart hammering against her ribs. "He didn't run with the money. He hid it for me. He knew one day I'd need leverage. The ledger is in the bank." Giovanni shook his head. "State Street is Falcone territory. Vinny has lookouts everywhere. If we go there, they will spot us. It's a suicide mission." Victoria looked at her shattered legs, wrapped in casts. She looked at the door to Lorenzo's room. "Vinny is looking for a mob boss," Victoria said coldly. "He isn't looking for a crippled waitress in a wheelchair. Get the car, Giovanni. We're going to the bank." The drive was a blur of rain and neon lights. Victoria sat in the back of the armored SUV, a heavy wool coat covering her hospital gown, a 9mm pistol resting heavily in her lap, a gift from Giovanni. When they arrived at the bank, Giovanni practically carried her to the vault attendant. The key from her father's personal effects, which had been in the police evidence locker for years before Lorenzo reclaimed it, fit perfectly into box 512. Inside there was no money, just a thick, black, leather-bound book and a letter addressed to Victoria. She didn't read the letter. There was no time. She grabbed the book. "We have it," Giovanni breathed, checking his phone. "But we have a problem. Vinny just hit the hospital. He knows Lorenzo is alive." Victoria's blood turned to ice. "Lorenzo is helpless. My men are holding the line, but Vinny brought a tank. Metaphorically speaking, he's coming to finish the job. Take me back," Victoria ordered. "Now. Miss, I should take you to a safe house. Take me back." The hospital corridor was a war zone. Smoke filled the air. Bodies of Bianchi guards and Falcone hitmen littered the floor. Victoria, in her wheelchair, was pushed by Giovanni through the service elevator. They reached the private wing. The door to Lorenzo's room was kicked open. Inside, Vinny Falcone stood over Lorenzo's comatose body, a pillow in his hands. He was going to suffocate him. A coward's death. "Vinny!" Victoria screamed. Vinny spun around. He smiled, his teeth stained with red wine. "Well, well, the waitress. I was wondering where you were. I see you still haven't fixed those legs." Pathetic. He tossed the pillow aside and pulled a gold-plated revolver. "I'm going to make you watch me put a bullet in his brain, sweetheart. Then we're going to have some fun." "Shoot him," Victoria said, her voice shaking but loud. "Shoot him, and you go to jail for the rest of your life, along with your father, your brothers, and every corrupt judge on your payroll." Vinny paused. "What are you talking about?" Victoria reached into a coat and pulled out the black book. She held it up. "The ledger," she announced. "Dates, names, bribes, murders. It's all here, Vinny. My father didn't just steal your money. He stole your insurance." Vinny's face went white. That's a lie. Is it?" Victoria opened the book to a random page. August 4th, Judge Harper. $50,000 to dismiss the grand jury indictment against your uncle. Want me to keep reading? Vinny lowered the gun slightly. "Give it to me." "No," Victoria said. "I'll kill you. Kill me. And Giovanni emails the scanned copies to the FBI, the CIA, and the New York Times." Victoria lied. She hadn't scanned anything. It was a bluff, a desperate, terrifying bluff. The send button is pressed the second my heart stops. Vinny looked at Giovanni, who had his weapon trained on Vinny's head. He looked at the book. He looked at the dying Don in the bed. "You win," Vinny snarled. "Give me the book. I leave. The war ends." "The war ends when you are dead," a voice rasped. Everyone froze. Lorenzo, his eyes were open. They were glassy with pain, but the fire was there. He had woken up. "Enzo?" Vinny laughed nervously. "You look like hell." "Victoria," Lorenzo whispered, his hand twitching on the bedsheet. Under the sheet, his hand was gripping the spare pistol he always kept taped to the bed frame in any hospital, a habit of a paranoid man, a habit that just saved them. "Duck," Lorenzo commanded. Victoria threw herself sideways in the wheelchair. Bang! Lorenzo didn't aim. He just fired through the mattress. He knew exactly where Vinny was standing by the sound of his voice. The bullet caught Vinny Falcone in the throat. He gurgled, clutching his neck, shocked, and collapsed backward onto the linoleum floor. The brat was dead. Lorenzo dropped the gun, his strength gone. The machine monitors went wild as his heart rate spiked. Victoria dragged herself out of the chair, ignoring the agony in her hip, and crawled onto the bed. She wrapped her arms around him, burying her face in his neck. "I got you," she sobbed, repeating his words from weeks ago. "I got you." Lorenzo looked at her, his vision fading into darkness again, but this time it was a peaceful darkness. "You kept—" "The legs closed," he murmured deliriously, trying to joke, trying to smile. "Shut up," she kissed his forehead. "Just shut up and live." 1 year later. The mirror in the bridal suite didn't lie. It showed everything. Victoria stood before the floor-length glass, her breath fogging the surface slightly. She wasn't the same girl who had scrubbed tables and dodged groping hands in the Onyx room a year ago. That girl was soft, terrified, and desperate to be invisible. The woman in the reflection was terrifyingly visible. She ran a hand over her hip. The silk of her custom-made gown was cool to the touch, but beneath the layers of French lace and tulle, the jagged ridgeline of the scar remained. It was a road map of agony, a souvenir from the night her bones had snapped against the marble floor. "Are you ready, Miss Victoria?" Victoria turned. Giovanni stood at the door. The giant enforcer, usually stoic as a tombstone, looked uncomfortable in a tuxedo that strained against his massive shoulders. In his hand, he held the object Victoria hated and loved in equal measure, her cane. It wasn't a medical device. It was a statement, crafted from solid ebony and topped with a handle of sterling silver molded into the shape of a wolf's head. It was a gift from Lorenzo. "Do I have a choice?" Victoria asked, a small, wry smile playing on her lips. "Lorenzo is pacing," Giovanni noted, stepping forward to hand her the cane. "He threatened to shoot the organist if he started playing before you were ready. I think he's nervous." "Lorenzo Bianchi doesn't get nervous, Giovanni. He just gets dangerous." Victoria took the cane. She leaned her weight onto it, feeling the familiar, dull ache in her pelvis. The doctors said she would walk again, and she did. But the limp was permanent. The fluid, easy grace of her youth was gone, replaced by a rhythmic, deliberate gait. Click, step, drag, click. "Before we go down," Giovanni cleared his throat, reaching into his inner jacket pocket. "There was one last thing. From the safe deposit box, you read the ledger, but you never opened the envelope." Victoria froze. The letter from her father. In the chaos of the war with the Falcones, the seizure of their territories, and Lorenzo's brutal recovery, she had put it aside. She had been too afraid that it would be an apology. She didn't want an apology. She wanted a reason. She took the yellowed envelope. Her hands, now adorned with a diamond engagement ring that could buy a city block, trembled slightly. She tore it open. "Victoria, if you're reading this, I am dead. I didn't run to save myself, sweetheart. I ran to draw them away from you. The Falcones knew I cooked the books, but they didn't know I kept a copy. I knew that as long as I was a ghost, they would hunt me, not you. But I also knew I couldn't protect you forever. So I made a deal with the devil. Years ago, I pulled a young kid out of a gutter. He was bleeding out, a bullet in his shoulder. I stitched him up. I didn't ask for money. I asked for a favor. I told him, one day, my daughter might need a monster to scare away the other monsters. His name is Lorenzo. He doesn't know who you are yet. But fate has a funny way of circling back. If you find him, don't be afraid. He owes me a life. He will give you his. Love, Dad." Victoria lowered the letter. A tear escaped, cutting through her makeup, but she didn't wipe it away. Her father hadn't abandoned her. He had been playing a long game of chess, positioning pieces from the grave to ensure that when the time came, she would have a king to protect her. "He knew," Victoria whispered. "He knew all along." "He was a smart man," Giovanni said softly. "Now come, the king is waiting." The onyx room had been reborn. The scene of the crime was now the scene of the coronation. The dark, blood-soaked history of the club had been scrubbed away, replaced by an opulence that bordered on obscene. Thousands of white roses covered every surface, their sweet scent masking the lingering memories of stale scotch and cigar smoke. The guests were a who's who of the criminal underworld. There were the heads of the 5 families of New York, the cartel liaisons from Mexico, and the corrupt senators who kept the laws flexible. They sat in stiff silence, fear radiating off them in waves. They weren't here just to celebrate a wedding. They were here to witness a merger. The Bianchi family had absorbed the Falcone territory. They were now the undisputed rulers of Chicago, and at the altar stood the architect of it all. Lorenzo Bianchi looked devastating. His tuxedo was black, sharp, and tailored to hide the Kevlar vest he now wore as a second skin. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his dark eyes scanning the room with predatory intensity. He didn't look like a groom. He looked like a general waiting for his queen. He, too, bore the marks of their war. His left arm hung slightly stiffer than his right. The shoulder joint fused with metal pins after the shotgun blast. When he turned his head, a faint white scar was visible running up his neck, a reminder of the night Vinnie Falcone almost won. The music shifted. The heavy double doors at the top of the grand staircase swung open. The room went silent. Not the polite silence of a church, but the heavy, suffocating silence of a courtroom before the verdict is read. Victoria appeared. She didn't look down. She didn't smile shyly. She looked straight ahead, her chin raised. She gripped the wolf head cane and took the first step. Click, she moved her right leg. Step, she dragged her left leg forward. It was slow, painfully slow. In any other setting, a bride limping down the aisle might have elicited pity, whispers of "poor thing," or "how tragic." But no one pitied Victoria Miller. As she descended the stairs, the light caught the diamonds at her throat, stones that had been seized from the Falcone vault. Her eyes were cold, calculating and fierce. She scanned the crowd as she walked, meeting the gazes of men who had killed for less than a wrong look. They were the ones who looked away. They knew the story. They knew she was the waitress who had shattered her body and refused to scream. They knew she was the woman who had bluffed a psychopath with a ledger and saved the Don's life. They knew that the cane wasn't a sign of weakness, it was a warning. "I survived," the rhythm of her walk seemed to say. "Try me." When she reached the bottom of the stairs, the aisle stretched out before her. It was a long walk. Lorenzo didn't wait. Breaking every tradition, ignoring the shocked gasps of the traditionalist elders in the front row, Lorenzo stepped down from the altar. He walked down the aisle to meet her halfway. He stopped in front of her, ignoring the hundreds of eyes watching them. He looked at her dress, her hair, her face. Then he looked at the cane. He didn't offer to carry her. He knew she would hate that. Instead, he offered his arm, his good side. "You look like you're ready to start a war," Lorenzo whispered, his voice low and rough, meant only for her. "I thought I'd dress for the occasion," Victoria replied, hooking her arm through his. "Are you ready to surrender, Mr. Bianchi?" "I surrendered the moment you spilled that drink on Vinny," he smirked. "I just didn't know it yet." He leaned in closer. "Does it hurt?" "Like hell," she admitted. "Good," Lorenzo said, his eyes darkening with a fierce, possessive love. "Pain reminds us we're still here. Let them see it. Let them see that they can break our bones, but they can't make us crawl." Together they walked the rest of the way, the Don and the waitress, the wolf and the dove who had learned to grow claws. The mismatch of their steps, his heavy stride, her rhythmic limp, created a strange, syncopated beat that echoed through the hall. They reached the priest, a nervous man who rushed through the Latin liturgy as if afraid God might strike the building down at any moment. When it came time for the vows, Lorenzo turned to her. He didn't recite the standard lines. Lorenzo," he said, his voice carrying to the back of the room. "Take you, Victoria, to be my wife. I vow to protect you when the world is dark. I vow to burn down anything that tries to touch you. I vow that your enemies are my enemies, and your scars are my scars. You saved my life when I didn't deserve it. Now, my life belongs to you." Victoria's hands shook as she placed the simple gold band on his finger. "I, Victoria," she said, her voice clear and bell-like. "Take you, Lorenzo. I vow to stand by you when the walls close in. I vow to be the keeper of your secrets and the healer of your wounds. You gave me a golden cage to save me, and then you gave me the key. I choose to stay." "You may kiss the bride," the priest squeaked. Lorenzo didn't hesitate. He pulled her close, his hand tangling in her hair, kissing her with a desperation that spoke of near-death experiences and second chances. It wasn't a chaste wedding kiss, it was a claiming. The room erupted in applause, but it was the applause of soldiers saluting their commanders. As they broke apart, breathless, Lorenzo looked down at her. He touched the scar on her cheek, then gestured to the room filled with the most dangerous people on earth. "Look at them," Lorenzo whispered. "They're terrified of you." "They're terrified of us," Victoria corrected him. She adjusted her grip on the cane, standing taller despite the pain flaring in her hip. She looked at the spot on the floor where she had fallen a year ago, the exact spot where Vinny Falcone had pushed her, thinking she was nothing. That spot was now covered by the train of her wedding dress. "Japanese pottery," Lorenzo murmured, referencing a conversation they'd had during those long, agonizing nights in the penthouse when she couldn't sleep. "Kintsugi. When a bowl is broken, they fill the cracks with gold. They say the piece is more beautiful for having been broken. Victoria looked at him, then at the cane, then at the crowd. We're not a bowl, Enzo, she smiled, a dangerous, beautiful smile that promised a long, chaotic reign. We're the hammer. Lorenzo threw his head back and laughed, a genuine, joyous sound that terrified the guests even more. He took his wife's hand. Come, Mrs. Bianchi, he said. Dinner is served, and I believe table 4 needs a drink. None. Victoria laughed, the sound mingling with the music. She squeezed his hand, planted her cane firmly on the marble, and took the first step into a new life. Click, step, long live the Queen. And that is the story of Victoria Miller and Lorenzo Bianchi. They say in Chicago that if you listen closely on quiet nights in the Onyx Room, you can still hear the sound of a glass breaking, the mistake that built an empire. Real life isn't a fairy tale. Sometimes the prince isn't charming. He's a villain, and sometimes the princess doesn't need saving. She just needs a loaded gun and a reason to fight. If this story gave you chills, do me a favor. Hit that like button. It helps the algorithm find more stories like this. And if you want to hear part 2 about what happened when the FBI tried to come for Victoria's children 10 years later, comment Mafia family down below. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell. You don't want to miss the next episode. Stay safe out there and watch where you step.